Have you ever heard a story where an act of pure, selfless kindness gets repaid with a cruelty that's just almost impossible to wrap your head around? Well, that's what we're diving into today. This is the story from 1970s Kuwait about a good deed that ignited a jealousy so toxic it ended up destroying an entire family.
At the very heart of this story, you have two men who couldn't be more different. On one side, there's Abdelkader, a man who built a really successful life from scratch, all through hard work and generosity. And then you have Turki Al Zamel, a man whose life was pretty much a series of failures and deceit. Their paths were about to cross, and the consequences? Absolutely devastating.
You know, it's wild how some of the worst tragedies start with something so simple. In this case, it was a simple act of charity. A successful businessman sees a man who's down on his luck, and he offers a helping hand, never in a million years imagining that his compassion would spark a fatal, all-consuming envy.
I mean, Abdul Qadir was the very definition of a self-made man. He came to Kuwait and, just through sheer grit and determination, became the owner of several shops. But honestly, more than his success, he was known for his kindness. So when he met Turki Al Zamel, he just saw a man in need. And without even a second thought, he offered him money, food, and eventually even a room in his own home.
But Turki's story? It was a completely different picture, one of constant failure. He actually arrived in Kuwait around the same time as Abdel Qadir, but very quickly got a reputation as a con man. His scams and his debts just grew and grew, so much so that his own family, his wife and 6 kids, had to leave him and go back to Syria. He was left totally alone, broke, and just desperate.
And this, right here, is where everything goes horribly wrong. While he was living in Abdel Qadir's home, being fed and cared for by him, Turki wasn't filled with gratitude. No. Instead, this toxic, disgusting jealousy started to bubble up inside him. He saw his benefactor's success not as something to be inspired by, but as a personal insult. It was an envy that would soon curdle into a murderous rage. And the craziest part? The final, brutal betrayal was set in motion by one last act of kindness. Abdel Qadir, who was still trying to help this man he'd taken in, had actually arranged a job interview for Turki, hoping to finally get him back on his feet. So, early one morning, Abdel Qadir tells Turki he's got a job lead and offers him a ride. But once they're in the car, Turki tells him to turn down this remote, unlit desert road. And there, he just suddenly attacks the man who saved him. He stabs him, then shoots him twice. He steals Abdel Qadir's watch and money and just leaves him there, bleeding in the sand, to die.
But even as he was bleeding out, in his final moments of consciousness, Abdel Qadir did something just incredible. As he lay there dying, he used his own finger to write the full name of his attacker, Turki Al Zamel, right there in the dirt. It was this desperate final act to make sure justice would be served.
And you'd think that would be the end of it, right? A horrible, brutal robbery. But no, Turki wasn't done. In fact, the most horrifying part of his crime was still to come. After leaving Abdel Qadir for dead, he got back into that stolen car and drove off with a new, even more twisted plan in mind. So where did he go? He drove straight to the one place he knew he could inflict the absolute most pain, Abdel Qadir's home. He was about to turn this place of safety and love into the scene of his next and most monstrous betrayal. He shows up at the door and tells Abdel Qadir's wife this absolutely monstrous lie. He claims her husband is wanted by the police for some crime and that he, Turki, had been sent to help her and their little boy escape Kuwait. And this poor, trusting woman who had also shown Turki nothing but kindness, she believed him.
And get this, while this poor woman is frantically packing, thinking she's escaping to safety, Turki makes a little detour. He drives to a scrapyard where a buddy of his worked and gives him a bag. He tells him it's an amana, a sacred trust for safekeeping. Well, inside that bag were the bloody knife and the gun he just used on Abdel Qadir.
Then he went back to the house, picked up Abdel Qadir's wife and their 3-year-old son, and drove them deep, deep into the desert. And that's where his true intentions came out. When the terrified wife fought off his advances, he brutally murdered her. Her little boy, who saw the whole horrific attack, was then killed with a large rock. Turki threw both of their bodies into a deep, abandoned oil pit and just left.
Okay, so while all of this horror is unfolding, back in that first desert spot, Abdel Qadir is found barely clinging to life. The police now had a victim in a coma, a missing family, and 2 absolutely crucial clues that were about to kickstart a desperate manhunt.
That message he scrawled in the dirt,
That was everything. Before he slipped into a coma, Abdelkader had given the police their one and only lead. Even though the first people who found him couldn't read, his final message was preserved. Investigators now knew exactly who they were looking for: Turki Al Zamel.
And this is where Turki's whole plan just starts to fall apart piece by piece. The guy at the scrapyard heard the news about the attack on the well-known businessman Abdelkader. He knew Turki was connected to him, so he got suspicious, opened the bag, and found the bloody knife and gun. He went straight to the police.
And then, the final domino falls. It's almost unbelievable. While the scrapyard owner is literally at the police station, a friend of Turki's shows up at the scrapyard, sent to get that bag of evidence. The police were tipped off, they quickly arrested the man, and he immediately told them where Turki was hiding. The net had closed. It was over. Once they had him, the full story came spilling out, and it was even worse than they could have imagined. During the interrogation, he laid bare the entire story, revealing a level of evil that shocked even the most hardened investigators.
He confessed to everything. He laid it all out. He admitted the attack on Abdelkader was driven by pure, simple envy. He detailed the manipulative lie he told the wife, and he confessed to the brutal murders of both her and her innocent child in the desert. And his motive for all of this? Just jealousy and greed. That's it.
So what happened to this family? It's just complete and utter devastation. Abdelkader's wife and his little boy were murdered in the desert. And Abdelkader, the man whose only crime was an act of kindness, stayed in a coma for months before he finally passed away, never waking up to find out the horrific fate of his family.
3. That's the number. 3 innocent lives just wiped out, all because of one man's envy. A loving husband and father, a devoted wife and mother, and a little boy who had his entire life ahead of him. All of them just gone.
Justice did finally come. In 1974, Turki Al Zamel was executed for his crimes at Nayef Palace. And the evil he'd committed was so profound that his own family publicly disowned him. They refused to even claim his body after the execution.
You know, there's an ancient proverb that just seems to capture this tragedy perfectly. Abdelkader's only mistake was showing compassion to the wrong person, an act of pure goodness that was met not with gratitude, but with blame, betrayal, and in the end, death.
So this whole story leaves us with this really tough, unsettling question. This isn't just about a crime, it's about the collision of two complete extremes of human nature. It really forces you to ask, in a world where such profound kindness exists, how do we even begin to make sense of an evil so absolute that it seeks to destroy the very goodness that tries to help it?